Why do some people automatically imagine the worst possible outcome, even in situations that seem small or harmless? You might send a message and immediately wonder if you sounded strange. You might wait for someone to reply, and suddenly your mind begins constructing stories. Maybe they're upset with you. Maybe you said something wrong. Maybe something bad happened. Before any real evidence appears, your brain has already created an entire scenario of what could go wrong. For many people, this pattern feels frustrating and irrational, but the mind rarely develops habits without a reason. At a surface level, imagining worst-case scenarios looks like simple pessimism. It can appear as if someone is just naturally negative or overly anxious. But psychologically, the brain often does this for a very specific purpose: protection. Your mind is constantly trying to predict what might happen next, so it can keep you safe. When the brain senses uncertainty, it starts scanning for potential threats. The faster it can detect a possible danger, the better it believes it can prepare for it. In many ways, this ability helped humans survive for thousands of years. Our ancestors who were cautious and alert to danger were more likely to stay alive than those who assumed everything would be fine. The problem is that the modern world rarely contains the same kind of threats our brains evolved to handle. Instead of worrying about predators or immediate physical danger, the mind now reacts to social risks, emotional discomfort, and uncertainty. A delayed text message, an awkward conversation, or a small mistake can trigger the same predictive system that once helped humans avoid real danger. The brain treats these situations as if they require urgent analysis, and suddenly the mind begins simulating every possible negative outcome. This pattern becomes even stronger for people who grew up in unpredictable environments. When your early experiences involved criticism, tension, or sudden emotional reactions from others, your brain learned that mistakes could have real consequences. Maybe a small error led to embarrassment. Maybe expressing the wrong opinion created conflict. Over time, the mind adapts by becoming more cautious. Instead of waiting to see what happens, it starts predicting problems in advance. Imagining worst-case scenarios becomes a strategy for staying prepared. For someone with this pattern, the mind often believes that worrying in advance will reduce future pain. If you already imagined the worst outcome, it won't surprise you later. If you anticipate problems early enough, maybe you can avoid them completely. In other words, the brain believes that imagining negative outcomes gives you control over uncertainty. Even though the process feels stressful, it creates the illusion of preparation. But there is a subtle paradox here. The more the brain practices predicting worst-case scenarios, the easier it becomes to do it again. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition. Eventually, the mind doesn't just prepare for problems, it automatically expects them. A neutral situation starts to feel risky because the brain has learned to treat uncertainty as a warning signal. The imagination quickly fills in the gaps with possibilities that feel real, even when they are only predictions. Another reason people imagine worst-case outcomes is emotional sensitivity. Some individuals experience emotions more intensely than others. Feelings like embarrassment, rejection, or disappointment may feel heavier or more overwhelming. Because those emotions feel so uncomfortable, the mind tries to prevent them at all costs. By imagining negative scenarios early, the brain hopes to avoid the shock of experiencing them unexpectedly. Ironically, this protective system often creates the very stress it tries to prevent. When the mind repeatedly runs through negative possibilities, the body begins reacting as if those events are already happening. The heart rate increases, the muscles tense, and the mind becomes hyper-focused on potential problems. What began as a protective prediction turns into ongoing mental noise.